Hey everybody, welcome. It's been a minute since I've done a Q&A for you guys. So we had a couple of things going on that prevented us from being able to do those regularly. So I'm excited to do a Q&A with you guys now. I'm going to be going through some of the recent questions that we've gotten from members. And you're welcome to add in any questions that you have below, and I'll try to answer them live. So you can go ahead and comment below with those. So, first question that we're going to be answering is from Adrian. And so, Adrian says, what's a good way to try to battle being a hypochondriac? I put ideas into my head that something is wrong with me all the time, and it came to the point I recently spent some money on my health that I didn't need to. I'm worrying about it. I'm finding something else to worry about. Okay, so here's a couple of important things, Adrian, to keep in mind with what's going on. First of all, I would highly recommend that instead of you referring to your situation as I am a hypochondriac, instead call it for what it is, which is that you have a pattern of hypochondria. Because when something important for all of you guys to realize is when you take the current problem that you're experiencing and you define it as a part of who you are, what you're doing is you're defining your problem in unsolvable terms. And when you define a problem in unsolvable terms, it's the fastest way to feel stuck and the fastest way for your mind to be given a signal of what is going to happen in the future. Because if you build up the identity of I am a hypochondriac, then what that means is as you go into your following days, you wake up the next morning and you've told yourself that and you've reinforced that belief system, you're now looking at the world through the assumption that you are a hypochondriac. So it makes the problem a little bit more challenging to solve. So instead, what's happening is you have a pattern of hypochondria, which means that your mind is currently looking for what could go wrong with your health or some type of thing that could be going wrong there. The next thing that I want you to, the most important thing for you to recognize right now, Adrian, is that the part of your brain that's causing you trouble right now is what's called the reticular activation system, or the RAS. And this is a problem for all of you guys. What happens is there's a part of the brain that it becomes trained on what it notices in the world. So your mind is in a constant state of looking for information and then deleting out other information. So for instance, your mind now has become trained to look for what could go wrong or what is wrong. So part of the way that you start to train that is you start to challenge it to look for other information and you break it off from the habit of looking for what's wrong. Okay? So that's obviously not, the full scope of everything that you're going to need to do to get this handled, but that will at least give you a good start. All right, let's go into Leanne. So Leanne has a question. Leanne says, I'm here because anxiety rules my life. Now I'm feeling agoraphobic. I suffer with other mental illness, but anxiety is the one I need help with most. I want a life, not just existence. So great. The first thing that I would recommend for you, Leanne, is the first thing we need to check for is to determine if there was something that occurred in the recent past that caused anxiety to shift for you. So very often when people are feeling agoraphobic and are not wanting to leave their home or not wanting to drive, usually about 60% of the time there was some type of significant event that occurred. So it could have been you were driving and somebody almost hit you, right? Or you got in a car accident or something like that. Or it could have been something totally unrelated to being outside of the home, like the loss of a job or something along those lines. So what we want to first check for is, was there some significant event that happened within about 30 to 60 days of the elevation of the emotional pattern? If there was a shift like that, then that probably means that what is going on is your nervous system is in a state of new pattern construction because some previous pattern was disrupted. So for example, what happens sometimes for people is they're at work, they go to work, yeah, they feel a little anxious or stressed, but nothing super crazy, and then all of a sudden they get laid off. And so what their nervous system has gotten so used to focusing on and using as a way to get their needs met is now upended. And so psychologically, their mind is in a new state of searching and grasping and creation, right, of new thoughts, new emotions, new behaviors. And so sometimes a negative pattern develops and crystallizes where an old one used to exist. So that would be my first question for you. That may not be your situation, but that would be the first thing I would be looking for. And if that is the case, then what that means is we need to get a new way in place for you to get your needs met. We need to get something new installed in your life to replace what was there before. And as the sort of new empowering vehicle, is what we call it, for meeting your needs enters your life, very often anxiety dissipates in direct proportion to that. So that's one thing that we need to take a look at. Okay, next question is from Sprout. So Sprout says, how can I control my depression and anxieties when I am having stomach issues because of side effects with my medications? I had to start cutting 3 times a day because of stomach issues. Plus, it has made me depressed and anxiety ridden. Okay, so here's the first thing to understand, Sprout. There's the trigger for what you feel, and then there's the pattern or the source of what you feel. Okay, so let me just say a few words about that. If you're having a particular symptom going on right now, with your stomach in particular, then what's happening is your mind notices that there's something going on with your stomach. So that's the trigger for the anxiety or the depression. The actual source of the anxiety or the depression, however, is the internal representation, key word for all of you, internal representation of what that stomach issue means. Okay, and so for instance, if you notice the stomach issue and your brain goes, oh, that's weird, my stomach's kind of upset right now, then chances are you're not going to be feeling a lot of anxiety about it. But if your mind focuses on your stomach and then it goes, oh my gosh, what's wrong with my stomach? Or why can't my stomach just stop doing this? Or what the hell is wrong with me? Why can't I just be normal? Right? And if it goes into that kind of route and your mind is overly fixated on it and expanding it in the mind, if it's creating a large internal representation, and if it's distorting what the actual trigger or signal is giving you in terms of just raw data and information, then that's probably what's causing the big issue. So the more you can separate between the trigger and the internal representation, the more freedom you can create for yourself, because the internal representation is all that you have the ability to learn how to control in your life. There are going to be things that happen in life that are triggers that are totally outside of your control. I mean, this is true for all of us. But what you can change is how you internally represent it. So that's the thing to start to get curious about. Stay plugged in with the community, keep looking for answers. And obviously, if you're looking for more individual help, what may be helpful is us setting up a one-on-one call, because then we can dissect it a little bit in more depth. The other thing you can do too is have a conversation with your physician and see if there's a different medication that you might need to switch to temporarily. If the two of you have kind of come to the realization that at least right now you still need to be on medications and that's what you're feeling, then you might need to try to see if you can switch to something different, okay? All right, next question. Let's go to Kaylee. Okay, Kaylee says, what can I do to stop myself from ruminating all of the time about things that happened in the past? It even interferes with my ability to sleep at night. By the way, thank you for accepting me in this group. Well, of course, you're welcome, Kaylee. Great question. I think this will relate to a lot of people. So, Kaylee, the first thing I would recommend that you do is, for any of you who have a past event that your mind returns to over and over, what needs to happen is you do a process that we call completing the past. So to complete the past, what needs to happen is you need to derive an empowering meaning from what occurred in the past. So let me give a sort of stark example. We have a lot of clients who are survivors of either physical or sexual abuse of some sort, okay? So obviously not even close to condoning that type of act on somebody, because it's obviously atrocious and horrendous, right, for somebody to do that type of thing. But unfortunately, it happens sometimes. We are not always in control of what happens in our external environment, and we're not always in control of what other people do to us. So the fact that that event occurred in the past, it can seem like it's a totally daunting thing that's going to persist forever into the future. What needs to occur is you derive an empowering meaning from it. I'll share a quick little story. There was, as for obviously everyone's familiar with World War II and the Holocaust. There was a psychiatrist who was a prisoner in one of the Nazi concentration camps. His name was Dr. Frankl. That was it. Yeah, Viktor Frankl. And what he found very interesting is when he was at the concentration camp, he saw that there were two types of prisoners psychologically. There were the types of prisoners who seemed to just totally become insular in themselves. They became totally downtrodden, and they usually only survived about 2 to 3 weeks inside of the camp. And then he also found that there was a second type of prisoner, and the second type of prisoner was somebody who was, of course, not happy that they were in the camp, but they had a complete survivor mentality. They felt defiant, they felt certain, they felt, I must survive, right? And those were the people who were able to survive multiple months or multiple years, right? And very often those were the people who made it all the way through to the liberation of those camps. And so what Dr. Frankl realized was the difference, was the meaning that both the prisoners put onto their situation. Both of them were in an identical situation, but one group of people were putting a meaning on it of, I'm already dead, life is totally over, there's no point, right? And then the other group of people had a different meaning that they were putting on things. By the way, Kim and Heather, I see you guys commenting. Hi, welcome. Glad to see you guys there. Okay, if you guys have a question you'd like answered, go ahead and put it in the comments. So the second group of prisoners, what they did instead was they created an empowering meaning. So they told themselves something like, I must survive so that I can make sure nothing like this ever happens to the Jewish people again, or I must survive so that I can reach my wife or reach my children, right? So they had something that was empowering to them that caused them to move forward towards a compelling future. And this is what most people, no, not most people, what all people who are experiencing depression are missing, is they're missing that they need a compelling vision of the future to move towards. All of life is about moving forward, right? That's what creates health. Mental health is the consistent, perpetual motion forward. When we feel depressed, what's happened is we're no longer creating a vision of how our life could be better, or what we're going to create, or how we're going to grow, or how we're going to help other people. So I don't know what your situation was from the past, Kaylee, but I'm just using the example of physical or sexual abuse because it's so profound. It's a very powerful, horrible thing. But we have people who recover from depression through that, and what they do is they change what it means. So you can't change the fact of what happened to you in the past, but you can change what you make it mean. And that's the most important thing that you need to do. Okay, so I hope that helps. All right, let's move on to Sarah. So Sarah has a question. Here we go. Sarah says, I think I have many questions. I don't talk to anyone anymore about my depression and anxiety. My depression now has a lot to do with trauma. It's affecting my life, good and bad. The anxiety around males can be bad. I just hurt a lot more now since I quit drinking and things are more clear. Will I ever stop hurting and their word are always there in my head? Will they ever go away? Well, first of all, Sarah, I commend you tremendously for getting off of alcohol. Like really, really, really awesome. Good job, because to break that one habit is fantastic. And actually, Sarah, the fact that you broke that one habit is living proof that you can absolutely break the habit of your mind consistently feeling the sort of negative, anxious, traumatic type of feeling. So here is the thing that you would want to take a look at. If there's a guy in your life that maybe you're trying to get close to, like you're trying to date or something like that, uh, you would want to take a look at the feeling that you have around the men. And the first question you would want to ask yourself is, what would I have to believe in order to feel what I'm feeling right now? Okay, what would I have to believe in order to feel what I'm feeling right now? And what that will do for any of you who are listening and want to use this, if you have like a, automatic emotional response to things that you don't quite understand and you're not sure how to deal with it, this is a really good first step. So you ask yourself that, and then just go with the very first thing that comes to mind. So it may be the thing that comes to mind is, he's going to hurt me, right? And so you go, oh my gosh, yeah, that's totally what I believe, and that's what I've felt certain of when I've been around men in the past. So you just get that out of your mouth, okay, and just write it down, maybe like what that big belief is that's causing you issues. Then what you would want to ask yourself is that really true? Yes or no? And don't go, well, I don't know for sure. Maybe he is going to hurt me. You want to hold yourself to coming up with a yes or a no. Is it really true that he's going to hurt you, if that's what the belief is? And 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to realize the answer is no. But let's say the answer is yes, right? If you come up with the answer yes, then you can ask yourself the second question. And the second question is, do I absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that is true? Yes or no? Or another way to ask it would be, do I have all of the information necessary to know for sure that this is true? Yes or no? Like, do I know for absolute certain that he's going to hurt me? Yes or no? And you, obviously, in that case, the answer is going to be no. And so by using this is an abbreviated version of about a 6-step process that we teach our clients, but this will kind of get you started so you can identify what the big issue is, the belief is, and then you can start to chip away at it. Okay, so I would start with that, and that should help you. All right, let's see. I think we've got, let's see. Gotcha. So I'm seeing some comments here. If any of you guys have a specific question about how to improve your mental health, then put the question there, okay? Because I'm answering questions about how to improve. Everything we do in this group is about making improvements and looking forward. So just, you want to think about an outcome that you're looking for and then ask that question, okay? Let's see. Next question we have here is Christine. Christine says, I really want to redirect my focus so that I can get out of panic attacks. How do you prevent it from happening to begin with? Okay, Christine, there's a number of ways to do this. I'm not sure if you're a client of ours. If you are in one of our programs, there is a tool that we have provided called the heart meditation. That is a very powerful exercise you can put on in your headphones whenever that's an issue for you. But the first and most important thing for you to train yourself on is adjusting your physiology. So there is a particular breathing pattern that can be very helpful to start to reset yourself. And what that breathing pattern is a deep inhale in through the nose and then a soft exhale out through the mouth. And what I like to imagine is, imagine if you, like a bobber in the water, like for fishing, okay? So what I kind of imagine is, as I'm inhaling in through the nose, you imagine that bobber is kind of lifting. So you direct your focus just to filling your lungs and then emptying your lungs, and then filling your lungs with air and then emptying your lungs, okay? So I would start with that, because what happens for most people is they call it a panic attack, and what's really going on is your mind is focusing on one particular bad outcome that you're afraid of, and then your mind is going into a repetitious pattern of language inside of your mind, and then you start to hold your breath, or you start to breathe in a very hyperventilating way, which then signals to your nervous system that you're in real danger, even though you're not. So the fastest way to get control over that is to start adjusting your physiology. So in particular, what you want to do is, when you get into a panic attack mode, you want to look at what your physiology is. Chances are your head is down, your shoulders are down, your breathing is super, super fast, probably. Your facial expression is probably like eyes wide open, okay, something like that. So what you want to start to do is purposefully bring your head and your shoulders up, sit upright a little differently, okay? Put your head level instead of down, don't allow yourself to fidget because you're probably going to feel an impulse to fidget, and then train the breathing. Okay. The only way that you overcome anxiety or depression, guys, is you have to train your brain and your body, which are the same machine. Your brain and your body are the same machine. You have to train uh, your we call it the body mind, right? Your body mind. You have to train your body mind to do what you want it to do. So that would be a first start. That's not going to be the full solution to what you need, but that would be the first big thing to start to practice, okay? Chelsea, I see you. Hi, welcome. Glad you're here. If you guys have questions, go ahead and put in questions in the comments, and I'll try to answer as many as I can, okay? Okay, going on to Ryan. Next question we're answering is from Ryan. Ryan says, I was once happy and couldn't wait to get out of bed, and I feel like that will never be the case again. So my number one question is that possible? So yes, Ryan, it's absolutely possible. I don't know how familiar you are with my story, but I was suicidal and depressed for about 2 years. Didn't want to move my life forward at all. Didn't think things would change, right? That's what causes somebody to have a suicidal thought, is they imagine a version of the future going really badly over and over. So Ryan, what I would say is right now what's happening for you is you have a pattern where you wake up and you imagine the future going badly. And when you imagine the future going badly, your nervous system becomes convinced that the future will go badly. So here's a key concept for all of you guys. Any thought that you suggest to your mind enough times becomes believed. And so when you keep thinking over and over, the future is going to be like this, the future is going to be like this, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between what is real and what you vividly imagine. And that's the good news and the bad news, because when you vividly imagine something going badly, your nervous system feels it's going to go badly and it immediately feels anxious. However, what you need to start to do is you need to create a vision to train your brain to latch onto, instead of the old one of how the future is going to go how you want it to. Okay, so that's the first big important thing. First thing I would recommend you start with is deciding on one goal that really matters to you. And chances are it may be a mental health goal. Like, you want to identify what is the number one emotion you do want to feel, okay? And then you want to start to fixate on how to go into that mode, okay? All right, great. Looks like we might have a live question here from Crystal. Crystal says, how to deal with derealization. I constantly think about it. Okay, so Crystal, here's what tends to happen. And this is the case for all of you guys. Instead of thinking about your issue as a big, giant, sort of pathological issue, what instead you want to look at are the sort of subcomponents of it. You want to chunk it down a little bit, because when you call it derealization, it becomes this big, giant thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I'm real. I don't feel like anything is real. Right? And it becomes this big, giant sort of issue. What's probably happening for you, Crystal, is you probably have somewhere between 2 and 6 thoughts that run through your mind perpetually. So for most people who are dealing with the sensation of derealization, they're usually telling themselves something like, this doesn't feel real, or I don't feel real, or is this even real? Something along those lines, right? And you can comment and let me know if that's the case. But chances are, regardless of what it is, there's somewhere between 2 and 6 thoughts that you think over and over and over again every day that cause you to feel those things. So you'd want to identify what those are. I would recommend you write those out on paper. And what I was recommending, I forget the person's name a few minutes ago, right? Is that really true? Can I absolutely know that that's true? That I said earlier in the video, I would recommend you start working on those, and that will give you a really good head start. Don't think of it as I have derealization. Instead, you want to think of it as I have a pattern of repetitively suggesting certain things into my mind over and over and over. It's like a bad song you get stuck in your head. You guys ever have that, right? Like you hate that song, right? But you heard it on the radio, well, no one listens to radio anymore, right? But you heard it somewhere, and then now all of a sudden it's just stuck in your head, right? So it's the same thing with a thought. That thought has just gotten stuck in your head, and it's become a hypnosis. It's become hypnotic. You believe it even though it's not true. Because again, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between what you suggest to it over and over and what is really true. Okay? So start to work on that, and that will definitely help. All right, let's go to John. John has a live question. He says, depression hinders me from finding a job. I have a hard time anticipating their rejection. How can I stop feeling that way? Okay, so chances are, John, you probably had a bad situation in the past or in the recent past where somebody rejected you. So either one of two things. You either had a job that was not a good fit in terms of alignment, right? Like perhaps, it was just a sincere situation where the employer wanted something from you that you were not able to provide, or there was just a values conflict. It was just not a right fit. Okay. If that was true, then what you need to realize is that that one painful experience with that one job is not representative of all jobs. So this is a thing that the mind does, and this is important for all of you guys, especially if any of you have had a painful moment from the past that is now dictating how you feel in the present. Our mind does three things. It deletes, it distorts, and it generalizes. So let's talk about generalization as one of the forces. These three things are the filters. Okay, this is how our brain creates our internal representation of the world. So what happened probably is you had a negative experience with this job, and then your brain went, all jobs are going to reject me. Well, that's obviously not true, right? But it's okay that your mind came up with that meaning, came up with that belief. So you need to detach between that one isolated incident and all of the plethora of hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs that are out there. Okay, it's the same thing that happens very often for people with their romantic relationships. Like, they'll have a really bad breakup, and then in their brain they make a story like all relationships equal pain, therefore I'm not going to go and pursue a relationship. Well, no, not all relationships equal pain. It's just maybe there was something going on in that particular relationship that caused you pain. So take that and recognize that there is a job out there that is going to make you feel very, very fulfilled. I have learned this time and time again coaching hundreds, maybe now thousands of people, where most people come up with a story that there isn't a job out there for them, or there isn't a romantic partner out there for them, or there isn't a way for them to create a really fulfilling future. And what actually happened was they had one or two or three painful experiences in the past, and then their brain went, oh, all of life is shitty, or all relationships are shitty, or all jobs are shitty. And that's not the case, guys, right? We're living in 2022. There are tens of millions of jobs out there. There are tens of millions of potential romantic partners out there. There's never been more of an opportunity to live life on your own terms than there is now, right? So your mind has probably gotten hung up on a story that you need to let go of. Okay, so that should get you started. Let's see. Next question comes from Chelsea. How do I overcome a lack of motivation? Well, think of it this way. You might even want to write this down. I don't have a lack of motivation. I have impotent goals. Okay, so what this means is the human nervous system responds to clear, powerful vision. Okay, so some people's goal when they wake up in the morning is to get through the day. Whatever your goals are, they're going to affect you. So motivation is the sort of natural outcropping. It's the thing that naturally rises up in us once we've developed something clear that we want to go after. So the thing that you're missing is something clear to go after. And that's what you want to start to think about. If you want a little bit more direction on how to do that, here's a way to get started. There are 6 categories of life mastery. There is career and mission is number 1. Number 2 is relationships. Number 3 is emotional well-being. Number 4 is finances. Number 5 is health and energy. Number 6 is spirituality. Okay? So you need to establish one or more really exciting goals that you would really like to go for in one of those 6. That would be a very good first start. Okay? John said, you nailed it on the head. I had a job for 6 years and we went through that exact example I gave. I stuck with it because I thrive on feeling fit in. Yep, I understand, John. That makes sense. But here's the thing to understand. There is a culture out there. There is a company out there right now who desperately needs someone like you. It's you don't have an issue with employment and job. You had an issue with alignment, right? So, John, you need to really get excited about finding that job out there that's going to be really fulfilling for you. This is the same thing on romantic relationships, guys. Like, very often, like, you maybe experienced rejection romantically, for example, at one point, because you had a particular characteristic that somebody didn't like, but somebody else in the world would absolutely fall in love with you for that characteristic. So sometimes it's just an alignment issue, okay? All right, let's move on. I'm going now to, by the way, for any of you guys who I'm answering questions, but you want to dig into things more, if you'd like to set up a one-on-one call, I'm happy to speak with you. So if you'd like to do that, just in the comments, you can just type in like, I don't know, let's just type in setup call, right? And one of my team members will get in touch and we can set that up for you. Let's see. I'm going now to Rebecca. Okay, Rebecca's question. Rebecca says, number one question I have about my mental health is I've been stuck in a depressed manic slump for over 5 years. I want my life back. I want happiness back. I want motivation back. And I don't know how to get myself out of this hole that was dug for me by my illnesses. Okay, so Rebecca, first thing I would say is where you're at right now is not your fault because you didn't know what was going on as things progressed over the past couple of years, right? So I'm not here to put any type of blame on you whatsoever. However, you have to ditch this story that your mental health is outside of your ability to learn how to control. If you keep the story that there's the illnesses and that the illnesses are dictating what is possible for you in your life, then that story is going to perpetuate as you go through your life, and you're going to forever have a story on yourself of what you can't do. So I say this with all the love and the respect in the world, Rebecca, because you might be new to kind of our community and what helps people actually create change. But let me just say a few words on this. The common messaging out there in the mental health industry that you guys have heard is this whole idea of ending the stigma. And by the way, it's a very good message because we should talk about mental health, right? We need to bring up when people are in pain. We need to have conversations about it. We need to create solutions. So that is true. That stigma needs to get broken and we need to be open and communicative. However, there is another narrative that has been developing over the past 20 years that has kind of been further and further perpetuated that has incredibly good intentions, but unfortunately is having very negative byproducts on people. And that narrative has become the idea that if you feel depressed right now in your life currently at the moment, or you have been feeling depressed for the past 5 or 10 years, that you have a permanent mental illness that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. And we therefore have gotten into this habit in the industry of defining the problem in unsolvable terms. We talk about it as a part of who we are. We talk about it as something that's totally outside of our realm to influence or control. And I don't think, and that is not helpful for people. It doesn't mean that you should feel guilt or you should feel blame about how you're at right now. It just means that you are currently missing the skills. You are currently missing the insights and the understandings and the skills to master your mental health. And so you're welcome to disagree with that philosophy and perspective. Some people, by the way, the reason why we like to believe that we have a permanent illness and the illness is defining what we can or can't do is because it becomes comforting. It's more comforting to believe that it's outside of our control or our ability to learn how to control, I should say, and that this is just happening to us as opposed to something that we can learn how to grow through. It's more comforting for us to believe that. Just kind of like, for instance, in romantic life, Like it's easier for us to come up with a story that it's our partner's fault, as opposed to the fact that maybe we're not doing something that we need to do to get a higher result. So, Rebecca, I would just say you're here, you're stepping up, you're looking for solutions. That's fantastic. I commend you tremendously. Let's look forward. Let's create a really awesome future for you and ditch this whole idea that, that all of these things have been happening to you. Instead, what you want to look at is that you've drifted into this particular mental and emotional series of patterns and you can get yourself out. Okay? So that's how we want to look at that. I would start with that, and that'll get us going. All right, let's see. Mercedes has a question here. How do I let go of past trauma and stop it from living my current life? I just answered this question a few ago, so I'm going to move forward. But again, you want to complete the past, is what we say, right? So you want to figure out what you're going to make it mean, and then you want to create a vision of the future and how you're going to use that. So the only other thing I'll say is the women who go through our program, if were survivors of sexual or physical abuse, and what they have to do, since they can't change the event that happened in the past, they have to change the meaning around it. This is why I gave that example of the Holocaust earlier and the two types of psychologies with the prisoners. So the women who go through our program who are successfully beat their depression or anxiety, they come up with a new story. So the story goes from I was abused and now I'm damaged goods and no one's going to love me, or any other person I'm with in the future might hurt me again, right? Some kind of story like that, to then being, you know what? That guy was just a dick. And he does not represent all men. He does not represent my ability to have a loving relationship with men in the future. I'm going to be even more grateful when I find my soulmate, because now I know how much to appreciate my soulmate compared to the asshole that I had last time. Right? That's a totally different belief structure so that it creates an empowering ability for you to go forward and create a future for what you want. What you guys really want to start to do is, instead of looking at the past, you want to start to ask yourself, what do I really want for my future? Firstly, right? Think of those 6 categories I just mentioned. And once you figure out what you really want for your future, now we have to resolve the inner conflicts that you're having between where you're at now and where you want to go. Okay? So that'll get you started. And Chelsea, this would apply for you as well, right? Survivors of mental and emotional abuse. Same thing. Same exact thing. Okay, it's obviously unfortunate and unfair and an injustice that happened, right? But us continuing to focus on it is not going to move your life forward. And by the way, you allowing the abuser to live rent-free in your mind enables the abuser to win. And fuck that, right? So you need to eject them from your mind. You need to decide what you're going to make this mean. Like, come up with a meaning, like, I'm never going to let somebody treat me like that again, and I'm going to create the type of relationship that I really deserve. Right? That's the type of meaning you need to create. All right, and that'll get you a head start. Okay, moving on to Erica. Erica with an A. Okay, Erica with an A says, I want to learn how to control my anxiety better, especially with restaurants, as just the thought of going to a restaurant nearly makes me sick to my stomach. Okay, so some of you guys have this where you have a particular setting that is a trigger for you to a particular feeling. This is what we call an anchor, okay? So here's the key thing to understand, Erica. Your nervous system is constantly learning to create associations. This is how your brain learns everything. So when it goes through a painful experience, or if it goes through a really painful experience, what we call a significant emotional event, like your parents divorcing, or you divorcing, or a layoff, or any of these types of situations we've been throwing out, what happens is when your nervous system is going through a moment of pain, it tries to create new connections because your brain is trying to keep you from experiencing pain in the future. So sometimes what happens is, I'll give you actually an example from my life. I have some severe food allergies, and I didn't know this until I almost, I don't know if I almost died because I got Benadryl and all those things, but it was pretty close. If I wouldn't have gone to the ER, I probably would have died. I ate a bunch of raisins of all things. Apparently, I'm allergic to raisins and different like grape things. Fun fact about me. So anyway, I eat a bunch of raisins. I go to the gym, and then all of a sudden, I start sweating profusely. My skin turns red, and my breathing starts to close up. So I'm freaking out. Obviously, I rush myself to the ER. They give me a shot of Benadryl, ambulance, all of that stuff. Right? This was like 2 years ago. And so then interestingly, then whenever I went to a restaurant for about a month or two and I would eat a food and I would feel any kind of tingle in my mouth or any kind of sensation, my brain would go, oh my gosh, I'm about to have an allergic reaction, right? Because I had a significant emotional event and my nervous system was creating connections. So what it did is it said, okay, I almost died. And what was going on when I almost died? Well, what was going on when I almost died was my mouth was tingly. So therefore, any tingle in my mouth must mean that I'm going to die. So it creates associations that way. So you probably had something similar, right? Maybe you had a bad experience at a restaurant. Maybe you find, maybe you had, I don't know. Maybe you just keep imagining it's going to go badly like that. But what I had to do was I had to separate between the trigger, right, the tingle in my mouth, and the internal representation of the trigger, where I'm telling myself, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And so if you start to separate those two and you start to get curious about how to change the internal representation, that's how you can get started. Chances are you probably have a language pattern that's going on. So I've given about 3 examples earlier in this call, so you can get to use some of those practices I just described. Okay, last question that we have for the day, unless we have anybody live who wants to add one, and I'll try to maybe grab one more. This one is from Renee. Renee says, thanks for accepting me in the group and being here to guide everybody. My number one question would be, how do I work on 2 at the same time, anxiety and agoraphobia? I would start with whichever one is more significant and serious and just focus on that one. And very often the less significant one will dissipate over time. Pretty simple, actually. So I would just start there. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I think that's all of our questions. So if you guys have found this useful, please add any comments. If you'd like to get some individual one-on-one guidance, just put in the chat. You can put a chat, like a comment like set up call, and we can set up a quick little 10-minute call so that we can understand your specific situation a little bit more, and we can advise you on what the best next step might be for you to get that resolved. So happy to have helped you guys. Thank you for those of you who've been participating, and we will chat with you guys probably next week, okay? So take care for now. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.